We're going to jump straight into a moment that, well, it really changed the world. September 11th, 2001.
Absolutely. On that day, you had 19 terrorists hijack 4 commercial airplanes.
And they essentially turned them into missiles, aiming them at these major symbols of American economic and military power.
Right. The crashes into the World Trade Center towers in New York and then the Pentagon in Washington. The result was just tragic, nearly 3,000 people killed.
And that event was the immediate catalyst, wasn't it, for what would become a decades-long global conflict.
It was. The message from President George W. Bush was, incredibly clear. The U.S. would find those responsible.
And the trail led pretty quickly to one group in particular, al-Qaeda.
An international terrorist network run by Osama bin Laden. The problem, of course, was that he wasn't somewhere you could just send in the police. He was being sheltered abroad.
What's really striking, though, is the global reaction.
Oh, yeah. Even though everyone knew the U.S. was preparing for a massive military response, most countries around the world actually offered their support.
There was this kind of rare international agreement that terrorism on this scale just had to be confronted with force.
And that set the stage for, well, a war that would last for 20 years.
Okay, so let's unpack where this all began geographically. Let's start with Afghanistan.
For anyone trying to picture it, Afghanistan is a huge, landlocked country in South Asia. Think incredibly high mountains like the Hindu Kush and vast dry deserts.
And its location is so important for understanding its history.
It really is. It was historically a key point on the Silk Road, connecting Asia and Europe, and that meant it was constantly being fought over.
We're talking centuries of conflict, from the British Empire in the 19th century all the way to the Soviet Union invading in 1979.
And that Soviet invasion was a huge deal. It lasted almost 10 years. When the Soviets finally left, they left behind a total power vacuum.
Which, of course, led to a brutal civil war between all these different local groups.
And that chaos created the perfect opening for a new power to rise. The Taliban.
They emerged in the 1990s.
Right. A very, very strict religious group that managed to take control of most of the country through, well, force and organization.
And it's so important to understand what their rule was actually like. This wasn't just a change of government.
Not at all. It was a complete societal lockdown. They imposed an extremely strict interpretation of religious law.
The specifics are pretty severe.
They are. Women were basically forbidden from going to school or working outside the home. Music, TV, even flying kites, all banned. Men had to grow long beards.
And here's the direct link to 9/11. The Taliban gave al-Qaeda a safe place to operate.
A safe haven. They provided houses and training camps where, the 9/11 plot was put together.
So when the U.S. demanded they hand over Osama bin Laden after the attacks,
They refused. And that refusal sealed Afghanistan's fate. It immediately became the first target of the war.
that action, Operation Enduring Freedom, started in October 2001, just a few weeks after 9/11.
Led by the U.S. and Great Britain. And they started smart, not with a huge ground invasion, but with massive airstrikes.
Targeting al-Qaeda training camps and Taliban military positions.
Exactly. And they also sent in small teams of special forces on the ground to help local Afghan groups who were already fighting the Taliban.
And that combination worked very quickly at first.
It did. The capital, Kabul, was captured in November 2001. A lot of Taliban fighters just fled into the mountains or crossed the border to Pakistan.
With that initial military victory, the international community immediately started thinking about the long term.
Right. Nation building. They began setting up a new, more democratic government. There was this real hope for peace, for better schools.
Which meant foreign soldiers would need to stay for a long time.
A very long time. But the immediate goal, the reason for the operation's name, was finding Osama bin Laden.
And the military thought he was hiding in the Tora Bor region.
It's this network of deep caves and high mountain passes, really rugged terrain right on the border with Pakistan.
A perfect place to hide.
The perfect place. The search involved thousands of soldiers, advanced tech like drones and satellites, tracking signals. It was a huge effort.
And it took nearly 10 years.
An entire decade. And in the end, he wasn't in a cave at all. He was found in a house in a city called Abbottabad, deep inside Pakistan.
That long hunt really defined the first decade of this war. But while that search was going on, the U.S. government's focus started to shift.
It shifted dramatically. By 2003, Washington was looking at a new target, Iraq, and its leader, Saddam Hussein.
So let's talk about the rationale for that. Washington claimed that Iraq was hiding dangerous weapons of mass destruction, WMDs.
Specifically chemical and biological weapons. The fear, or at least the stated fear, was that he might give those weapons to terrorist groups.
But this was really controversial on the world stage.
Oh, incredibly. A lot of countries in the United Nations disagreed. They wanted to give the weapons inspectors more time to search inside Iraq.
But the U.S.-led coalition decided to move forward anyway.
They did.
Yeah.
In March 2003, they invaded. This was presented as a different front in the same war on terror, even though it was a separate conflict.
And just like in Afghanistan, the initial invasion was fast.
Overwhelmingly fast. It started with shock and awe, airstrikes on Baghdad. Ground troops moved in quickly, and Saddam Hussein's government fell.
Major combat was declared over in just a few weeks.
But then came the really complicated part. After that victory, search teams looked everywhere. And no large stockpiles of chemical or biological WMDs were ever found.
Which, of course, led to huge questions about why the war was started in the first place.
Exactly. And meanwhile, those foreign soldiers had to stay in Iraq to try and keep order. The war shifted from a quick invasion to a long, difficult occupation.
And rebuilding the country was a massive challenge.
A huge challenge. The basic infrastructure, electricity, clean water, it was all in a terrible state. And trying to fix it in an active war zone was...
Well, it was almost impossible.
And many Iraqis weren't happy about foreign troops being there.
Not at all. Different Iraqi groups started fighting each other, and they also started attacking the international soldiers.
Using tactics like roadside bombs.
IEDs, yeah. Improvised explosive devices. They became the signature, devastating weapon of that conflict. So you have this incredibly stressful environment for everyone. Soldiers, Iraqi families, schools and hospitals didn't have supplies.
And the cost just kept going up and up. We're talking billions and billions of dollars.
And while all this was happening in Iraq, what was going on back in Afghanistan?
Well, efforts to rebuild were still happening. There were elections, new roads were built, and maybe most importantly, millions of girls went back to school.
A huge reversal of Taliban policy.
A massive one. But the country was still very unstable. The Taliban started to gain strength again, especially in rural areas.
And they used violence to disrupt the new government.
Exactly. So foreign soldiers had to stay much longer than planned, mainly to train a new Afghan army. And that was a very slow, very difficult process.
And we really have to talk about the impact on the soldiers themselves in both wars.
The human cost was immense. They served for months, even years, far from their families, facing constant danger.
Life-changing injuries were common, and the mental health impact was just enormous.
Absolutely. The stress of that kind of combat, with roadside bombs and an enemy you can't always see, it led to serious issues like PTSD for so many. Thousands of Allied soldiers died.
Eventually, though, the combat mission started to wind down.
They did. In Iraq, the main combat mission ended in 2011.
But leaving Afghanistan took much, much longer.
It was a much more unstable situation. The process of handing security over to Afghan forces was very slow and full of setbacks.
The final end came in August 2021. The last American soldiers left Kabul.
And that officially marked the end of the longest war in American history.
So, looking back at these 2 decades of conflict, what are the big lessons learned?
I think one of the biggest is that it's much, much easier to start a war than it is to end one successfully.
And the idea of nation building is just incredibly complicated.
It really is. You can't just impose a democracy on a country that has a completely different history and culture. It takes more than just military power.
And the cost, both in money and in lives, was just staggering.
Trillions of dollars. And hundreds of thousands of lives lost, soldiers, contractors, and so many civilians.
The technology of war also changed forever.
It did. The rise of drones completely changed how enemies are tracked and how battles are fought. It's a whole new dimension of warfare that we're still figuring out today.
These conflicts really did shape the world we live in now.
They absolutely did. And I think the most important question for you as you study this era is to think about when military force should be used to solve problems in other countries. And, maybe more importantly, when it shouldn't.
See you next time.